Hi, everybody. My name is Angelini-Cooke with EAC Therapy. And with me, I have Brittany Banks, a recent MSW graduate from Hunter College's Silberman School of Social Work in East Harlem, New York. And like I said before, so I wanted to give some recent 2020 social work and human sexuality professionals an opportunity to share their experiences with grad school and recognize the awesome work that they have done and will be doing in the future. So, hi, Brittany.
Hi. So
How
nice
are
to
you
meet
doing?
you again.
I know, right? Just to let everybody know, Brittany and I were classmates at the University of Delaware, and we took an incredible class on gay and lesbian film
Oh,
studies.
Mary Ruth, the
It was it was
best.
the best.
She was my recommendation for my master's, actually.
Oh, I think she did one for me too.
She's
So
wonderful
we can
that way.
blame her.
Oh, thank you, Mary Ruth.
Thank you. All right, cool. So why don't you tell me and the rest of the world a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I use she, her pronouns. Let's start there.
Nice.
I'm 25 years old. I live in New York City. I primarily specialize in child trauma therapy with definitely a talent for crisis intervention. I currently am looking for jobs in schools because that's what I want to do is I want to do in-school social work, whether it be a private contractor or school social work position. New York is a bit on a hiring freeze right now, which makes things a little hard, but I'm really optimistic personally because I really believe in my skills. I just gave the graduation speech for my college over Zoom, so that was cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, they did a call for student speakers, and I submitted a speech and was chosen. So I feel very blessed to be selected. It was really lovely.
I would love to get a copy of that speech.
I will send it your way. I quote Disney in it, so we're all surprised.
So why don't you, can you tell me a little bit about the Silberman School for Social Work? Is there anything about it that makes it different from any other school?
To be honest with you, I only know about the New York City school structure. So I applied to Fordham and Columbia as well for social work. And I got accepted to both, but really went with Silberman one because I had a really heavy focus on diversity training, which were communities I was so interested in working in that I really wanted that special training in it. Additionally, it's a 2-year program that you're immediately in a clinical placement. The way it structures is you do classes for two days a week, and then you're in a clinical setting 3 days a week, so that you can reach those mandatory 1,200 hours by the end of the 2 years. What that means is if you're a first year, that's really, really intense because you're just starting to learn everything and you're very much thrown into the mix. But at your placement, you're provided a lot of supervision, hopefully, and the school does try to investigate and make sure that you are receiving that proper supervision as well. That being said, there are a couple different pathways that you can take at Silberman, which is also something that really contributed to a really diverse and eclectic cohort. You can do the accelerated program, which means if you're coming in with a BSW or something, you don't have to take the basic social work classes. So you kind of can jump ahead a little bit. So I think that's a 1.5 years or just 1 year program. Or you can do the 2-year program, which is what I did, which is just 2 solid years of you just go straight through, which is very exhausting. I'm very happy to be done. In addition to that, there's also the OYR program, which I wish I could remember what it stands for right now. But what it is essentially is if you are already working in a social work field, i.e. you already are doing a job that is within a social work organization, you can then use that as your quote internship. So you're not having to then leave and work for free. And take the classes in addition. So it's kind of like a contract with your organization that you are earning clinical hours there while you are doing your schoolwork. And most of those are nighttime classes. So that's a really, really hard thing to balance because they're going to work like the whole day and then coming and attending classes at night. And that's really challenging.
Yeah, I know that for myself, my other classmates, when I was going through social work school, so many questions about how am I going to balance this, right? And even in the interview process, like how do people afford this, right? Like,
Exactly.
like this seems like I'm not going to be able to work for 2 years.
And that's the thing is like, I remember very specifically in my interview process, them talking with us about like, how will you financially prepare for this? And they were I appreciated that they were very transparent about the fact that most of these internships don't pay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're essentially working 2 years. Like, I well exceeded the 1,200 hours for free. And that's challenging when you're also paying through the nose for the school. So it's loans, it's planning, it's this, it's that. It's such a challenging process to plan for and prepare for, especially when prices are changing very constantly. I know for me, like my tuition got raised like last summer by $1,000. So that was a little unexpected. And I ended up having to work through the winter break a little more extra to make sure that I could pay that.
And I think it really speaks to the social work profession, right? That prospective social workers are pre-sacrificing, right? 2 years of their life in order for something that like they know is going to really impact the lives of so many others. And I think that really speaks to like our like the values that we have as individuals and also professionals.
Absolutely. And I think also we have to look at the way the system of social work is structured, that it does rely on these unpaid internships of these master's candidates. I can't tell you how many interns were at the organizations that I worked for and took on equal loads to the people that were working there full time and getting paid for it. And there is a big feeling of injustice in that. And I think I saw that especially in the past year with my graduate school cohort of people really organizing to try to at least gain a platform to talk about that and find a better balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, like, what was one of your best memories in grad school?
It's so funny. Weirdly enough, some of the best memories are some of the worst moments. Like I specifically remember very early on in the grad school process, it being in one class where we were trying to schedule presentations. And this is a year-long class and it was called Practice Lab. And it was the class where essentially like you tackle all the big history stuff, like the history of oppression of indigenous cultures and LGBTQ and everything regarding Black civil rights and everything. And it's just a class where it's like, okay, we're going to make sure you have the grounding. But that leads to very divisive and intense conversations. And it's also supposed to be a class that encourages you to examine yourself and your personal biases. So everyone's a little vulnerable in that class to begin with. And very early on in that process, we had to schedule presentations, and the way my teacher structured it was like it felt like the Hunger Games because we had the option to steal presentation dates from other people, but she had no end date to it, like no like end period to how many you could steal. So people were just stealing back and forth repetitively, and I was like, I cannot do this. This is so poorly structured. And it really frustrated me. And it was the first moment that I was in grad school and like really felt like my temper was rising. And I was like, this is such a bizarre thing for me. Like of all the things that are tackled in this classroom, this is what I get upset about. So that's one of my like worst memories, but I remember fondly because it was funny. It's funny now in retrospect. But also just a really like lovely memory is that my first year I interned at a middle school in the Bronx, and there's this one kid that I had that I swear to God, she has my whole heart. I forever will just be attached to this child. And a lot of moments with her, like just watching her personal growth every time that she threw my words back at me in a very defiant way of, look what I learned, now I can use it against you. And that was always like, it makes my heart swell just thinking about it. So.
Oh, that's really sweet. So like, would you so you would also say that some of those moments in your practice lab were some of the most challenging moments. Any other challenging moments that you can remember these past couple of years?
I think, you know, we go to undergrad and we really learn how to like structure and do the work. And I think graduate school, what it really is, it's not a matter of doing the work, it's a matter of finding the time to do the work. So I think, yeah, right. So I think balancing just the exhaustion and how much you want to give of yourself. And something that was so important for me to learn my first year was boundaries. And it's something I really wasn't taught before last year, is how to draw boundaries. Because I always thought that like being my best self, being my most caring self meant I was always available. But that is just a recipe for burnout. And I'm so glad that I had a supervisor that cared so much about me my first year, that puts like repetitive effort into teaching me how to draw boundaries and helping me to enforce and maintain them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but with that being said, like it's hard when you see so many battles that need to be fought and you have to pick and choose. That's really, it's really draining, and it gets a little hard on the spirit to see so many places that need change and to recognize your own limits to enact that change.
Yeah, and I think we could see that right now.
Yeah. And I think like something I've learned a lot regarding this process is like the importance of balance in activism, and that like everybody has a lane that they really specialize in and do well in. And when we try to occupy all the lanes, all it leads to is burnout. So we need to communicate and support each other and all show up to the fight so that people can focus on the thing they are best at and we focus on the thing we are best at.
I love that answer. Yeah, absolutely. We can't be all things to all people, right?
Yeah,
We
and we feel an obligation to be, which is really hard.
yeah. But like, and I think that like second year of social work is all about like finding that niche, right? Like here, like first year, I kind of learned everything that I can learn about anything, right? And
Yeah.
then second year is like, yeah, like you said, like finding those boundaries, like, hey, you know what? This is my lane, and this is where I feel most effective to the people that I want to work with, right? And that doesn't mean that the other lanes aren't important, and it doesn't mean that I can't lend support, like you said, but it allows me the opportunity to like build up a resource and a reference network to go, hey, listen, this is my lane, but I have these other lanes and these awesome other people who also occupied those lanes. Let me,
Absolutely.
yeah, like, and as a practitioner, that is where you shine, right? By saying, you know what, like that isn't my specialty, but let me show you five other people who that is their specialty.
And it's important to know those five other people and work within your network, and especially to like keep in contact with your cohort. And you know, also, as you said, like you find where you work most effective. And when you find yourself working in an ineffective way, that's so hard. Like I personally found myself in my second year placement, like I didn't feel as effective. I wasn't ineffective, but I didn't feel like my strengths and talents were being used to their full effect. And that was really hard to get through. But there was also a lot to be learned in that process of just learning how to work within a system that I didn't fully agree with or find valuable, but also learning how to work within that and work for change within that and do my best within that system and within that limitations.
Oh, love that. So with that, like, do you feel like you have a grad school legacy that you can speak to? And like, if that legacy hasn't been established, like, what would you like your legacy to be?
So I was thinking a lot about this question, and I'm not really sure. I think when we think about wanting to have a legacy, we limit our own capacity for growth and change. Because we're constantly learning and growing and gaining new information. And when we create this concept of, I want to be remembered for this, or I want people to know this about me, we limit our capacity to incorporate all the things we're learning and change as a person. And like, I think the mark of a great social worker is being dynamic and flexible and changeable. and that your clients should change you. Your clients should increase your education. You know, what's the thing we say in social work all the time? The client is the expert of their own experience. Yep. And if you come in thinking you have this legacy and this expertise, you limit that possibility for growth. I think, like, if I were to leave a legacy, I would want people to just remember that I was kind and patient and flexible.
I like that. Yeah. And I like that. Like that also reminds me of you have to meet people where they are. Right.
Yes.
And I know that for me, and like what you were speaking to about the population that you want to work with. And I think we're going to get to this in a little bit. We have to meet people where they are. Like, we cannot speak to somebody from our own experience. That is not going to work. And our clients are going to call us out on it.
Yeah, and they're going to feel it, and they're going to feel that gap, that we are just applying the makeshift model to every one of them. And that's the big issue. That's a huge clash that I've had with places that I've worked, is I sometimes know a model that works better, but they are like, oh, we don't use that here. We use this one model. This is what we use across the board. And with that, you're not meeting the specific needs of the client. One model does not fit all at all.
Exactly. So like, let's talk about some like resources, some like tools that you have found that have been like really useful for you in this journey. So like the first thing, I know I read a lot in grad school. So like, have there been any books that have been especially really helpful for you along this journey?
Oh man. I read so much. I think I read most recently, in my most recent semester, I finished a class on group therapy, and I read a lot of Middlemen. Right. And so that was really helpful just for understanding like the historical context of group therapy and how we've changed it, evolved it, made it better, and also what people come to groups looking for. So I really enjoyed that book. I also, for my personal enjoyment, I really dug heavily into Savage Inequalities. I have some of my books here. So Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozol.
Okay.
And what it tackles is just the dark disparity in our school system, and how we continue to segregate schools even now with commodity of resources, and also with the representation of our students, the diversity of our students. And I think I really gravitate towards that book because I work a lot in schools, and that's where I want to focus. And even like my research paper that I ended up writing was how Black children receive higher levels of suspension rates, which lead to differentiating life outcomes and a decrease in later life success, because if you have higher suspension rates, you have a higher risk of interaction with the law, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a vicious cycle that we are not focusing on. And how can we implement restorative justice practices that do not focus on suspension, expulsion, detentions, et cetera. I also, I stacked up my books over here.
Good, I'm glad.
Random Family by Adrienne Nicole LeBlanc. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
It is a story of essentially just a nonfiction personal snapshot of living in the Bronx and what that looks like, and both like diverse families of the ones you make and the ones that have left you and not been there, and how to navigate that, how you make your identity within a community, and also what that looks like. And it was really important. My old supervisor actually gave it to me because it was so representative of the population we were working in, and gave a really great insight into a lot of the difficulties that my kids were dealing with.
Sounds like you had some really good supervisors.
I had the best supervisor my first year, so I was really, really lucky. We're still in contact. She is my role model for who I want to be in social work. She's just so exceptional. And she also finally gave me The Gift of Therapy by Irvin Yalom, right? Are you yes or no on this one?
I'm so happy that you mentioned that. I was gifted that book in my sex therapy supervision class, and it's
I shouldn't throw it at everyone. I think it's such a gift. Gifted is the right word. I was gifted it by my supervisor as well.
Yeah. I think he just speaks to like he is exactly who I want to be as a therapist, like that this is a journey, right? Like that this is like we are on a journey, right? And that like let me be your travel agent. So like we can get to where you want to go. Oh, I'm just all about
It
it.
also, it gives a great starting point to like get to work on yourself and do that self-examination. And like without it, you cannot use your countertransference effectively in therapy. And that really just equipped me to use myself in the process better.
So let's actually talk about the fact that like Yalom can be a really helpful tool for us right now with recognizing the difference that's in the room.
Oh
Like
my God.
it is like we
Absolutely.
need him right now. We need him more than anything because he speaks to like that is a superpower in of itself, that like that difference is going to be the thing that's going to get us to where we need to go.
Absolutely. And like I recommend him to eat, even if you're not a therapist, even if you're
Yep.
not involved in therapy, like he makes these academic concepts so consumable for the layman, that it's so worth pursuing. Everything he wrote, like everything I read of his in grad school, I was just like always snapping along and being like, I'm gonna quote this. This is speaking to my soul right now.
Absolutely. Oh, good. I'm so glad that you mentioned Yalom.
Oh, I do my readings.
Yeah.
That is one thing I did really do in grad school is I did the readings. Oh my God, I could not have gotten through this program without doing the readings.
Well, and think about it like, you are given these wonderful resources that I will, like later we're going to talk about what advice would you give for an emerging social work grad student, but like you are given a buttload of resources for free. Use them.
You know, I'm about to lose access now that I've graduated. I'm about to lose access to like my online library, and like I have literally given my passcode to like so many of my friends, being like, download whatever you want, like take it while you can.
Yes, it's
Because everything's behind a paywall, and we limit our capacity for growth when we put everything behind a paywall. It's so frustrating.
it really is. So I mean, you said that you're really interested in trauma. Like, are you a Vanderkolk fan?
A bit. I haven't like focused as much on that. I did a lot of child focused like trauma therapy and everything. So it was a lot more of a child focused perspective and intervention perspective.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like we took classes on like trauma therapy. So, um, like Bessel, the body remembers.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There was even some books that I like from undergrad. I don't know about you, but there are some books that I read in undergrad that I still pull out, right? In
Absolutely.
my sessions, like especially with like trauma, like why zebras don't get ulcers.
Yeah.
Such a good book that I, especially with like stress management, because oh my gosh,
You
stress
know,
will kill you.
I think something that was so interesting is um so we've all read To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Like
Mhm.
we've all read it. It's part of like the American curriculum. And I think what was very, very interesting is I was working in a middle school when my kids were reading it, and they got to see it on Broadway recently, and the Broadway production. And they're like, and that was really cool for them. They were very, very excited about that. They really loved that. But like as we were discussing the book and what they saw and everything, for me, when I read that as a young cis white suburban girl, in middle school, I was like shook by that book, like rattled to my core. That was my first real intersection with racism. And talking to my kids about it, I went into it really expecting them to have a similar profound reaction. And all of them were like, yeah, like we know. We know that Black men get killed in this country for no reason. Like this book isn't about history. This is about everything. Like we know. Like this isn't new information to us. And it both like broke my heart and also was so important about like, let's re-examine the books we're using in American curriculum because they're so focused on educating white people.
Ooh,
Like
ooh.
honestly, like look at all the books that we have for like that growing up process, those AP pathways. And they are so focused on giving white people a social conscience and have no support for all the people that have been living this oppression and already have that.
Yep. Yeah. What lens are we looking through here, people?
Yeah. I mean, think about like Gatsby or Catcher in the Rye and everything, like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
These kids aren't connecting with that. They don't care. They don't give a shit about some privileged white boy who's trying to decide whether or not he, like, his existential life crisis. They are worried about if their parents are going to be okay, if ICE is at their door, if their family is making rent the next month. Let's give them books that actually connect with their experience. We need to radicalize the American education system to make it more applicable and equitable for all. I'm so, like, this is my point.
Thank you, Brittany Banks, for that. Yes, absolutely. Quote her right now. So let's talk about some other like forms of media. So like you were telling me before that your thesis is on media consumption. So like in framing this for like your grad school journey, like what have been some really important like songs that have really gotten you through this journey?
Okay, so the one that I always listened to when I was just really struggling at 4 a.m. with those papers was The Impossible Dream from Man of La Mancha.
Really?
Over and over again. It's like, it's riddled through my Instagram stories when it's like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and I'm just dying. I want to go to sleep and I cannot write anymore. I play that song and I'm just like, this is my quest to really lean into that, you know? Also, I'm Here from The Color Purple, sung specifically by Cynthia Erivo.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that the woman has in her pipes that is ungodly. Like the sounds that come out of her are just, I've never heard anything like her voice. It's just so breathtaking. And finally, the song that I've really been latching onto lately, and I even quoted in my graduation speech, is from Frozen 2. It's the Do the Next Right Thing song.
Okay.
Which I think, I've had a couple of kids that have been orphaned in this more recent pandemic, and speaking with them about that grief process has been really challenging, and that's given a very helpful pathway to discuss how painful and devastating and halting that grief is.
Oh, I love that. I was thinking you were going to say Into the Unknown. Or
no, I no, like, yes, I love that song, but the one that has really resonated with me is Do the Next Right Thing. And that's actually the words I put on my cap. And I even quoted in my speech, when one can see no future, all one can do is the next right thing. And I feel like those words are very resonant right now.
Yep, moment of silence for that one. Yeah, I really love that. I mean, when I think about that song, like from somebody who is in recovery, right? Like that song is recovery, right? That is when I heard that, I was like, somebody's in a 12-step fellowship right now.
Yeah, right. No, it's every day. It's making the choice. It's every choice being a choice to be the next right thing, to do the next right thing. And it also, like, it's both comforting and empowering because it makes you feel like you have a capacity to do good again when you feel very limited in your options.
Absolutely. It gives you a sense of like autonomy and agency.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that power and that locus of control.
Absolutely. And that's so important right now when we all feel so helpless and out of control.
Insanely powerless. Yeah. So what about some like other kind of media? So like what about like TV shows, movies, like even memes, right? Like what are the things that have been really impactful for you?
Well, as I say memes, I think a lot about how consumable we've made therapy through memes, which I really love. I can't tell you the amount of times like my group chat will blow up with like these jokes of like, my therapist called me out for this and everything. And how much we've opened the conversation about like what therapy should look like and what you should expect of your therapist. I think that accountability is really important because a lot of people go in, I had a classmate that did their presentation, their thesis presentation on this, and I thought it was so important that we go into a lot of our therapy sessions not really knowing what it's supposed to look like and how we can advocate for ourselves within that therapeutic relationship. And I think it is our job as therapists to talk about those guidelines and give our clients opportunities to advocate for themselves and also critique us and be open to that critique and adjusting. And that's how you build a good solid therapeutic relationship, in my opinion. But regarding media, I've been blessed with the timing of media for my master's career. The fact that The Good Place ended this year, and I got to listen to the podcast and watch that whole show and like examine how it helped me be a better person. And that the creator, Mike Schur, very much said that like his hope from it was that just the people working on it would be encouraged to be a better person. And that this show would bring a little good into the world. And I really feel that. I really think it drove people to be better. And in addition to that, because I work with kids, Steven Universe has been such a massive part of my career, curriculum, consumption, all of it. I love that show. I sing it all the time. I think it tackles everything from communication, mindfulness, LGBTQ, like it's just everything it tackles in such a consumable and fun format. It's such an incredible creation. I really am so impressed with that show.
Who's your favorite character?
So I actually dressed up as Amethyst for Halloween this past year. But I think I connect a lot with Garnet, that kind of balance of a person. I think I really attach to.
I'm so Lion.
I love it.
I feel like I provide that safe space for people.
Yes. Absolutely. I fully agree.
Yeah, and I know that like Steven Universe has really come up a lot in counseling for LGBT youth, because there's also the topics of shipping, of headcanons, because it creates us, it stimulates our possibilities of what could be, and representation, right? Like I think that we've also been really blessed these past couple of years that like LGBT representation, even like other stories have been, we've seen an increase, and that has been a joy to watch, because my clients will come into the room and they will say, oh my gosh, are you watching this? Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, good, I'm glad that you are seeing your experience.
All of it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're seeing your experience on screen.
Absolutely. And that's so important. And also, I think it's even more important to us as therapists, because this is what my whole thesis was about, is how we can use media as a therapeutic tool. Because my kids would come into my office and be like, Miss, this thing happened. I don't know how to talk about it, but have you ever seen this episode? Or like, I don't really know how to explain how I'm feeling. Can we listen to this song? I think this sums it up. Like my kids, when we were trying to say goodbye to each other last year, they made me playlists. They made amazing, beautiful playlists that I still listen to that like summed up a lot of their feelings. And that was their way of saying like, thank you and parting with me. And that was also a really important processing tool for that termination process.
Oh, and we know that termination can be like,
oh my God. And I think what was so hard was terminating in the pandemic this year.
Yep.
All of it was over the phone. And at the time I was working with preschoolers. So that was extra challenging because they can't work independently with me.
Yeah. Any like what have been like your favorite movies?
Oh man. I mean, I think it's funny. I literally watched Frozen 2 right as the pandemic started. And I just like dug into it really hard and latched on very, very firmly. But I think I watch a lot of kids movies and a lot of things that my students would be consuming, so that I have like common platforms to engage with them on. And also because I enjoy it and I want to know what they're being shown. I want to know what they're watching. I want to know like what the messages are. And if we have to talk about things, then maybe the messaging isn't so great.
And I know that you're a really big Disney person. I know that from undergrad. That was when Cinderella came out, and you were all about some Cinderella.
Have mercy, be kind. It's still my mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cinderella, Aladdin, reading all of them. I'm so obsessed with Disney. I'm so entrenched with Disney. I think I saw Cinderella in theaters an embarrassing amount of times. I think I exceeded 10 in theaters, which is really embarrassing. And a lot, like in my defense, a lot of it was because Richard Madden is so stunning.
He's yeah, yep. Well, so with Disney, I feel like Disney's a wonderful platform for us to connect with our clients, and the one that has been really coming up for me and some of my clients has been Moana.
Yes.
With just the end, right? Like of that like identity, like who are you? Like and like what say your grandmother was saying, like, who are you, right? And like what would your response to that question be? And then what would you say to Tafiti? Like which Tafiti is like the representation of you, right? You're the one who made that journey, right? And like that has been really impactful. And
Yeah.
with the hero's journey, right? Like, are you familiar with Joseph Campbell, right? Of course. So Disney uses that theme
Over and over again.
perfectly. Onward, can we talk about Onward?
Onward is beautiful.
And Onward really speaks to what we were talking about, like those other kids, right? Like those D&D kids, right? Those kids who march kind of to the beat of their own drum, and that they have purpose too. I love it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. As you're talking about Moana, I think something that I really took away from the Moana is the power to choose, and like to choose change. Like Moana very much chooses her own destiny, even when everyone else is telling her, like, don't do this, it's wrong. But she knows, like, she needs to choose it. And at the end, and Maui choosing to do the right thing. And at the end, Tafiti is running towards her with all this rage and anger and hurt. And all of that is the symptom. All of that is lashing out because she has been hurt, right? And then she chooses to not hurt Moana. She makes the choice to let it stop with her, and with that, recover.
Mm-hmm.
And I find those parallels very interesting and very helpful. And like, especially when working with kids, like that inspiring the power to choose moments are really helpful.
Absolutely. I could, and like the reality of this is like we could talk about this for
representation in Disney for decades.
Because
Endgame came out last year when I was like in my first year, and I remember like using like 3 different bless my first year supervisor, she's so patient. I remember using 3 different supervision sessions to talk about how stressed I was about Endgame. Because I was so scared that Steve Rogers would die because I love him so much. And then I got my heart walloped with who actually died and everything. So like it didn't end well on any accounts because I wanted everyone to just be fine and my Avengers to be happy. But
well, so like I know that we have spoken about the fact that I use a lot of superheroes in my therapy with some of my clients, and I feel like that's kind of like how we reconnected. And so I'm wondering if they were to make a movie about your grad school journey, right? Who would play you?
So it's really funny. I was really thinking about this, and my first thought was Anna Kendrick, because I really I've just always kind of attached to her. She has that kind of like quirky awkwardness, but she also has this like really sweetness to her and this intensity, and I really, really like that. But more recently, and it's not for any kind of visual representation, but more in the ability to portray the dynamic. More recently, I watched The Great on Hulu. Have you heard of it at all? Okay, so it's the story of Catherine the Great. It's a satirical humor like comedy. It's great. It's wonderful. But Elle Fanning is playing Catherine, and I've been very quickly warming up to Elle Fanning and just like thinking that she's like marvelous and so sweet and so doe-eyed and so pretty. And then I watched her in this, and she did this amazing job of like using her sweetness and her kindness as a mask for her intensity and hiding behind that mask to also make radical change and like swaying people with love and affection and like mental manipulation, which like her tact is just so off the charts. And I feel like that really speaks to a lot of my strengths as a therapist, is like, I think my sweetness and my undying like kindness and love and everything is really something that gets through to people. And then with that, like the trust is gained and we can do real work.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
And then tell me who the villain who would play the villain.
Oh man. Again, like I think one of the things I found most difficult with becoming a therapist is that it's so hard to like hate people anymore. Because every time someone does something that really bugs you or pisses you off or like sets your blood a boil, you're like, but I know why you did that, so now I can't be mad about it. You know, like we understand people on such a different level that like we can't be mad at people because we're like, oh, that's just your trauma. Okay. So I think if there was a villain, I think it'd be the American school system. I'm so ticked off with the fact that we've let schools stay the way they are for so long and that funding hasn't been addressed. And like, you know what, if I'm going to say a villain, Betsy DeVos. Yeah, Betsy DeVos is my villain. Let's say that. Because she is. Everything that she is doing to our education system is so detrimental on such a massive scale. And all you have to do is look at the data and it tells you that. Like, it's that simple. There is just so much data for ways that schools could be helped, reformed, and even with limited resources. I worked in a school that had limited resources, and the principal knew what he was doing and was so proactive about using the money that they had effectively and made milestones, like giant strides in helping repair that school, the community, and the staff, like making sure that the staff were held accountable. And I think when you see people that really understand how to do the work and want to do the work, you really see radical change. And I think we've just become so complacent in the school systems, especially.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I think that's a great answer, and I really like the fact that you took that, like, the villain is oftentimes not a person, it's a thing. It's an idea, it's a belief, right? And that is the thing that holds us back from getting where we need to go or being the best that we can possibly be, right?
Well, let's look at what a villain is. It is someone who creates a barrier for you to overcome and tries to thwart you at every turn. So like that to me isn't always a person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times, especially with us as social workers, it's the systems that we work within, because we all know that the systems didn't become broken with this pandemic. They were already broken. This pandemic just made it very obvious.
Yes, absolutely. And, with, we have the pandemic that we got going on, and then, enter in racial injustice, right? And like,
Absolutely.
it's just like right in our face right now. And we can choose to look at it or we can choose to not look at it.
Yeah.
And
everyone's trying to talk about like, why is it so bad right now? What do you mean right now? It's always been bad.
Yep.
It's always been broken. People are just to their breaking point because they've been being broken for years. Not like anyone who has any idea or has worked within these systems is not surprised by anything that's happening right now. If anything, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, about time. Okay, we're radicalizing. Yeah, seems about right. I'm surprised it took until 2020.
Yep. And I know a lot of superheroes, I mean social workers, who are putting on their capes right now, right? Like, okay, let's go, right? Social workers unite.
Come from. We understand these policy systems like nobody's business because we worked within them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So every superhero, right, has a mentor, right? So who would be a good a good grad school mentor for you? And if they were here right now, what would you tell them?
Well, like I'm always going to chalk it up to my girl Brittany Brown. She's just everything to me, and she recently started a podcast, and that's been really comforting. But Brittany Brown is like everybody's superhero, so I'm not going to claim her. But I will say my cohort has been really exceptional. I've made some really amazing friends who have such diverse backgrounds and have helped so much in my personal and professional education. But more than anything, I think that little girl that I was talking about before, she's such a superhero to me. She's so resilient and so incredible and really just did the work, you know, just wanted so badly the opportunity to work on herself and be better, because she knew she could be better, and recover and gain these tools. And I think that was really amazing. But more than that, even my first year supervisor, I want to say her name, Lauren Bachman, is just the most incredible social worker I've ever had the luxury of meeting. She's so exceptional and taught me so much, both in practice, in patience, and in just modeling. She really just inspired me with how to engage in these systems, and gave so many platforms for me to ask questions and examine myself and get feedback, and provided this sounding board. She's just such an incredible social worker. I really want to be her as I go through this process. And I will always have her voice in my head. Every time I said, but, she interrupted and went, and. So all of my buts were always replaced with and I feel like that opened a whole new world of possibilities for how I spoke to myself, how I spoke to my clients, how I spoke to my friends. And we don't think too much about our rhetoric, but I think our rhetoric is something that holds so much power, especially when working with young clients. So I'm just so grateful that I lucked out. I literally just lucked out so hard with getting the best supervisor from the word go. And it just drove me so hard in this program.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. It's so good to know that like we are supported, because unfortunately so many emerging social workers are not, and that really speaks to the fact that our profession needs more support, right? We need more social workers. And so like, what would you, what advice, what comfort would you give to an emerging social work grad student?
Oh man. I think comfort is that you're going to get through it. And if you don't get through it, it's okay. And that there are better places for you to be. Don't push through something that doesn't feel right, I think is a really important thing, because there are some people that come into social work really believing that it's a good fit and like find out it's not, and continue to push. And like, this profession is one that will just burn you out so hard. So if you do not feel like it in your bones, in your soul, in every fiber, don't do it. Which is such a conflicting thing, but you really got to have like that gut drive for it. And in addition to that, I think if you are going to do any work before you come into grad school, I highly recommend doing work on yourself. I think that is something that so drastically benefited me in this program, was one, that I'd gone to therapy before it. Two, that I have like a very unflappable sense of self-confidence, which helped so much when working with middle schoolers, because you will not believe the insults that these kids come up with. My God. And having that tough exterior is important, you know? It was literally like being back in middle school and like being bullied again. But you really have to know yourself and know your triggers and know your boundaries. Because if you are doing that work well in the process, you're going to take a lot of damage in the meantime until you have done that work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are coming into grad school, I think it is so important to be centered in your sense of self and do the work around that prior to. You don't have to be done, but you have to have started that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's really important. And I usually tell people a good social worker or a good therapist has a therapist, right? So it's really important to know what's going on with you, to really kind of go on with that countertransference, right? Like, because it's going to happen, and it's okay.
Part
Right?
of the process.
Right, exactly. Like it's going to happen. And so what about, is there anything coming up for you? Like any exciting projects or anything or any projects you would like to do?
Well, right now is a really, really tough time with the pandemic. I had 2 job offers on the table that are currently on pause because New York is in a hiring freeze. So that's really tough. So but I've been focusing a lot on gratitude during this time. I have a lot to be really grateful for. And I still am getting to support a lot of my kids. A lot of my kids started emailing me and reaching out to me once this pandemic hit. So getting to connect with them and support them, and also reconnect with like that organization that I worked with my first year, who like all of my coworkers I adored. So getting to talk with them, and hopefully like a contract will come about there once like everything's settled a bit more. But in the meantime, I think I'm just like taking a little time to revel in my graduation, studying for my licensing exam whenever I'll be allowed to take it, who knows. And also, you know, in more recent weeks, just trying to really focus on activism and give platforms for the voices that need to be heard, which at this time, that is not my voice. And I think that's a really important thing to be aware of and to recognize. But even when the time is not for your voice, you can use your voice to elevate the ones that need to be heard, and do the work, like do the grunt work that those people that are speaking and speaking so passionately right now should not be responsible for doing and do not have the time to do, you know, and just start having conversations with people in your life and take personal responsibility for the people that you allow in your life.
Ooh, I love it. Well, hey, thanks. I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. And
this is so lovely. I know you and I are both Broadway babies, so we've been consuming all of this Sondheim content over the past like.
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. You know, so Brittany and I, asynchronously, or no, like synchronously, we watched the Sondheim birthday celebration, yes. And it was so many tears.
And I think like I bring that up because I think that's something that's really important to remember at this time, is like Bernadette Peters singing "No One Is Alone" really moved me at that time. And like, that is such an important message right now. Like, no one is alone, but there are people on both sides of every argument, and those people have support. And we have to make sure that we are aware of that, and we are working to address that, and also working to have conversations to educate and sway people. I think people become so divisive in this time that we forget to start to focus on hearing each other. And it's only from hearing each other that we can find discussion and commonality. That being said, there are other parts of this argument that are not up for debate, like Black Lives Matter, period. End of discussion, not a debate, done. But when examining personal privilege, there's a lot to discuss there. And I think giving platforms for that self-examination that aren't met with criticism or critique is important.
Nice, awesome. Well, you know, again, I do want to thank you so much. I'm so glad to reconnect with you. I'm so happy for you graduating. I know that, you know, that was only a couple years ago for me, but like this is a huge accomplishment. And you
hasn't really sunk in. I gotta be honest.
Oh, it will, right?
I'm still waiting for that brick to fall, you know? I still want the relief. But I feel like I graduated into such a messy world that it's hard to feel any sense of relief.
Well, I hope that you will provide yourself some of that, you know, use some of that mindfulness, right? Use some of that self-compassion, right? And that like when that moment happens for you, that you will like have that moment of yourself where you can like really be so grateful for this experience, because, you know, you're going to, in say 20 years, right, you're going to look back and be like, you know, all your littles, right, like, hey, what did you do in 2020? I became a superhero. Right?
Do I get, I want a suit, you know, like I want that superhero suit.
You get it.
And that's what I should do. That's what I should do now that I've graduated. Get me a power suit. That's what I want. I want my power suit.
Oh, love
I
it.
want to come in, and I know I'm such a smiley and bubbly girl, but I can be intimidating when I want to, and I want to come in and people to be scared of me when they should be, because I am a scary woman when you mess with my children. I swear.
Yes, absolutely. Mama Bear.
Oh, I will protect them. I will burn this world down for them so that they can have a safer future. Mark my words. I am ready.
Awesome. Well, I hope that you have a good rest of your day. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. This is so wonderful. Thank you for doing this. Your
Okay, cool.
questions were so interesting. I really had to think about them. So thank you so much for such engaging and interesting questions.
Well, I'm a rather engaging and introspective person.
That's true. Yeah, I remember it well.
All right, here we go.